Good evening. You're
Good evening.
here with Courtside with Lawman and Carmen B.
We're back once again.
We are. We are here again to educate and inform the public about criminal law issues.
Definitely. And if you have issues, you can call in, right, Carmen?
Yes.
There's a phone number we'll give
Please
you.
feel free to call us at 916-384-8204. Again, 916-384-8204. Call in with your questions throughout tonight's episode.
And I think we want to give you a little warning. Carmen's good at that.
We do. Again, the purpose is to educate and inform. Our answering of your questions does not form any type of attorney-client privilege, attorney-client communication, relationship between lawman Keith Staten and anyone who calls in, nor between myself, Carmen B., and anyone that calls in. Again, our purpose is to educate and inform.
So tonight, I think I called it the criminal process, right?
You did.
And you can talk about any question. You can ask any question that we can do. But what I mean by the criminal process is that a lot of people don't understand exactly what's going to happen to them when they get arrested. Because we can tell you all day what to do before that happens and as that's happening. And that should be, am I free to go? And I want my lawyer. But at that time of arrest is the key time in your process, because that's when you know you're about to go to jail. Now, you can't be afraid to go to jail, because if in fact they have done anything wrong and you have not done anything wrong, then you've got to trust the process. Okay? So the process always begins with you arrive at the jail. Now, sometimes you arrive at the jail and the police want something from you, like a blood test or something like that, right? You know, they tried to give you one, or they're going to ask you to get one. Now, I will tell you this. The one thing that a person has to do, and you got to get clear on this, you guys, because everybody gets pulled over for DUIs and stuff. So the thing about DUIs is this. On the back of your DL-44, which is your license application, which you probably don't look at or even notice is there, is a promise that if anybody asks you to test, law enforcement in California asks you to test, you must test. It's actually a condition of your license. And so what that means is, in DUI, drug, other under the influence type of stuff, the officer is going to give you the choice of a blood test or a breath test, usually. And that's the only two available. Urine's not available anymore. But a blood test or a breath test. And so to comply, all you have to do is test. Now, you should do it and you must do it. You don't have to go through the reindeer games and things like that, like, looking at that and all that.
By reindeer games, what exactly do you mean, lawman?
I mean these field sobriety tests that officers will give you, and they're geared to fail. They are geared to fail because they are subjective. It's what the officer views. If he thinks you swayed 1 inch, you swayed 1 inch.
What are some of those types of tests?
All right, the first one they're going to try is they'll try this, what's called the horizontal nystagmus. It's finger, or they'll take a pen and do it like this. Now, there are rules about this. It has to be about 12 inches from the eyes. It should move in a slow fashion. And they'll tell you, watch the pen. Follow the pen. Now, if you got glasses, contacts, things like that, it could get in the way. But
if your eyes are dry.
Yeah, or red and bloodshot. But the point is, when your eyes are following the pen, it should follow the pen smoothly, and it should go to a 90-degree angle. So when the officer passes it back and forth, they're looking to see if your eyes are jumpy. If your eyes are jumpy, it could indicate a person is under the influence. But there are other medical problems and issues that also could cause your eyes to do that. So that's the first reindeer game. That's usually the first one they're going to show you. Then
What about the 1, 2, 3, 4, 4, 3, 2, 1, 1, 2, 3, 4,
Yep.
4, 2, 3, 1? I can
Well-
barely do that here, and I assure you, I've had not a drink.
They are geared for failure. In fact, there's a group called NHTSA, National Highway Traffic Association, something like that. But they give out these standards. And they tell us that there's only a few of those tests, the walk and turn, the horizontal and the nystagmus, the stand on one leg, that are really official tests. You don't see the finger count thing anymore too much because it's not really a standard test. But it is the 4, 3, 2, 1, 1, 2, 3, 4. They also used to do the alphabet test a lot, like say the alphabet backwards or something like that, something you'll never do in your life. And that's why these tests are geared to fail, because no one runs around practicing these tests.
And a lot of times, again, if you're stopped by law enforcement, you're already nervous. And so that factor may impact how you perform, even if you've not had a single drink or a single substance. Just being nervous when asked to stand on one leg, you may sway because you're nervous.
And when you stand on one leg, they'll tell you lift the other leg up 6 inches. Now, do you point it to the ground? Do you stand level your foot? You know, what is 6 inches? Nobody's going to go down there and measure it, things like that. And imagine if you're a person who may have had surgeries on your knees, your legs, you know, it's tough for you to balance anyway. What about weather? What about shoes? Ladies with heels. I mean, first of all, I say you should do them unless you're on probation and you have to do them. But if you're going to do them, take your shoes off. It'd be much, much easier to do them. But they're going to have you go through these tests, okay? And really, you're not required to do them as an adult driver. Not at all. You can refuse those tests and say, I just want to give you some blood. And why blood? What do you think, Carmen? Why blood over maybe a breath test?
Oh, why should the person
Yeah.
select to do blood over a drug test?
Yeah.
There are a number of different reasons. One, what they're measuring is your blood alcohol content, right? And so if you give them a breath test, even though they're supposed to wait a specified time period before actually having you blow into the machine,
15 minutes.
The reason for that is because instead of accurately measuring the alcohol content, if you had just recently drank alcohol, it's going to measure the content of the alcohol that's in your mouth or that's in your esophagus and get an inaccurate reading.
Because what are they looking for? When they ask you to blow, they always say blow harder, harder, harder. What are they looking for? What do you think?
They're looking to get the deepest amount of breath that they can so that they get a more accurate reading,
Right.
assuming that the machine is working accurately. But that's the start of the criminal process, is the point at which you are arrested. Sometimes you're arrested right when the alleged illegal activity is occurring. There are other times where you're not arrested until months, weeks, or months
Years.
after the supposed alleged activity.
True.
Lawman, what happens in those circumstances?
Well, something will happen and you're not there when the cops arrive, you see? So because you're not there when the cops arrive, they don't know who to arrest. They may know and they suspect you, but you may not ever realize that you have a warrant out for your arrest. Now, what they do is sometimes they will send a letter. And if they send you a letter, it will tell you what crime that they are accusing you of and that you have a court date that you need to attend, or at least fix the warrant. That's what they really would say, is fix this warrant. The warrant may have a bail amount on it, and you would have to go into the warrant office, the sheriff department on Orange Grove, near ARC is usually where they're doing it now, especially during COVID. It used to be downtown, but that's the place now to go in and check in on a warrant whereby they send you the letter. If you get the letter, it's likely that the matter is not that serious to where you're going to end up staying in jail and a large bail and things like that. Usually a misdemeanor. and some felonies. But that's how the process will start. So you're checking in there in order to even do booking or anything like that. And booking really is photograph, fingerprints. Booking should not be a session where you're talking to them or anything like that.
And why not, lawman?
Because everything you say can and will be used against you.
But what if the officer is just chatting me up because he's a nice guy?
Sounds like consensual contact. Sounds like he's a nice guy, but he is there to book you in.
Well, it's not consensual contact because I'm under arrest and I'm in the booking hold. So I can't really leave, but I mean, he's being nice to me. He asked about my kids and how my day went and whether or not I'd had anything to eat. It was really like the officer was concerned. So why are you saying I shouldn't talk to him? It's just regular conversation.
Well, he may have even given you a pillow so you can lie down on the table. But I'm going to tell you something. The problem is when you are there, you are still being questioned by officers without any representation. It's nice to be chatty sometimes. I mean, if you want to talk to me about how to grow daisies or something like that, you can talk to me about that. It is your will. That's why I said consent. You see, what you're not understanding is you're consenting to talk to them when you talk to them. So that's where the consent comes in, because they're not forcing you to talk. And if you want to get chatty, you can get chatty. But we're talking about a time period where you're probably going to be really nervous and scared. You won't know what's happening to you. The booking process can take up to 8 hours or so. And so at the 5th hour, you're tired, you're sleepy, you want to get out of there. You might start yelling and screaming and saying, let me out, and then shoot.
Here's the thing. You can be chatty, but what we're telling you is that you should not be chatty. The officer is not your friend. And we're not saying that the officer is your enemy. We don't want to get the hate email saying that Lawman and Carmen B are saying that the cops are our enemy. That is not what we're saying at all. What we're saying is the cop is looking for all of the evidence in order to pass it on to the district attorney so that you can be prosecuted. So you can actually give them evidence by the thing you are saying to them. You think it's casual conversation when the officer asks you how much have you had to eat. But when you tell the officer no, he notes that in his report because that means it was easier for your body to then process that alcohol and put you at a higher blood alcohol level much sooner than it would have had you had a full meal.
There's a lot of science going on in DUIs and people don't understand. It is a science question because the ultimate charge is saying you were 0.08 or higher at a specific time. And that time would be when you were driving. By the time you get booked in, it's about an hour later. By the time you take a test, it could be 2 hours later. There's a 3-hour presumption, which means I just got to get you to a test within 3 hours of driving. And it's presumed that you're 0.08 or higher if it is 0.08 as the result. So the chattiness, the freewheeling conversation, it's just not necessary at that time. And if you're serious about protecting yourself, then you'll be serious and you'll be quiet. It is a time to do some self-reflecting. Wonder, why am I here?
But wonder that to yourself.
That's right.
Not out loud and not to the officer.
And you mentioned about this breath machine, right? Now, I've heard, and they tell me, I can be on the side of the road, and right after they smell me and ask me questions, they gave me this little black box to blow in. Should I blow into that thing?
You're not required to. That's a preliminary alcohol screening device. It's not accurate. The results of it are not even admissible in court unless both sides agree, which as defense, we never agree. We rarely agree. If it's going to help us, then the prosecution isn't going to agree. And if it's going to help their case, then we're not going to agree. So that device does not come into play. And you don't have to take that particular test. Now, the officer may tell you, hey, if you just blow in this and it shows no alcohol, I'm going to go ahead and let you go. That usually is not true, because even though you may blow into it and blow up a measurement of 0.00, the officer may still say, well, based on your driving, I still think you are under the influence of something. So maybe it's drugs. And he's still going to take you down to the station, and you're still going to have to take an actual test, either the breathalyzer that is there at the station, which is the more accurate than this breathalyzer that they give you in the scene at the scene, um, or a urine test or a blood test.
Now, I'll tell you. Oh, you want to keep going, or let me tell you about that device. They do call it the preliminary alcohol screening device. Now, there are some preliminary alcohol screening devices that you can click a button and it will actually spit a readout. Now, some agencies use those,
like a
receipt. Exactly. Just like the breath machine downtown will do. Now, there are a couple of things. If you are on probation for DUI, you must take that black box. You have to, if asked. That's the one condition where adults have to do it. And the other, if you're under 21, you have to take the black box test. You have to do the preliminary alcohol screening device. So know that if you're an adult and you're not on probation, you do not have to take and complete that little black box. Now, a couple other things about that black box. Remember I said it's science. Well, the airflow would be controlled by the officer, meaning the officer can actually control how much air he captures that will be analyzed by the machine. The other part of that is you're never going to see the readout. Usually, officers will just have you blow. They won't tell you what the amount is. And right after that, they will tell you, turn around and put cuffs on you. Because that machine is generally used for what's called probable cause to arrest. We've talked about that before. You need probable cause to search and arrest. That device, if it shows alcohol in your system, can be just seen as probable cause to arrest. That's why they do it last. You'll see that device is the last thing that they'll have you do at the scene. So the way it looks is, the cops pulled me over. I'm sitting in my car. I might pull out my ID, insurance, and registration. And it's good to have it already clipped together, the registration and the insurance card. The ID usually in your wallet, and you got to reach for it. But I'm going to wait till he gets to the window, and I'm asking him, am I free to go? And the officer might say, well, no, I thought you were speeding or doing this, or you were weaving or something. But from whatever he says, she says, I have one thing to say.
I'm going to say, excuse me for 1 second, lawman. The camera appears to be a little blurry. I'm going to try and clear that up for you.
That is much better, actually. And my shiny head comes through. Yay! But, so at that particular time, you're exercising your constitutional rights by asking, am I free to go? Now, the officer's going to say, no, of course not. And they're probably going to say, we smell alcohol, and I want you to do some reindeer games. I want you to do some of these things, these field sobriety tests. Remember, as an adult, when you're not on probation, you can refuse them. And they may say, well, hey.
Well, let's be clear, because some people get confused about what they can refuse.
Yeah.
You cannot refuse, the vehicle code section does not allow you to refuse to take a chemical test, meaning blood, breath, or urine. That does not include the preliminary alcohol screening device.
Right.
That is the device that is there at the station, again, or urine or a blood draw. What we're saying you can refuse is to do the different field sobriety test that they will offer you to do. You are not required to do those tests, and most people don't know that. And so they attempt to say the alphabet backwards, or to touch their nose while leaning their head back and standing on one foot, or
counting
walking
30 to themselves.
Yeah, counting to 30 to tell when 30 seconds is up, or standing on one foot. You do not have to do those field sobriety tests.
Correct.
Now, the officer will try and convince you, oh, if you do them, then I can just let you go. We know that that's not likely to happen. You're going to do them, and the officer's view is going to be that you failed them, even though you may believe that you did the test correctly.
Right. People always feel I did wonderful on those tests. I did everything they told me to do. And then next thing you know, you read a report and they say, I instructed him and he just screwed up.
We do have a question here in the chat coming to us from Sean. And that question is, if you get your record expunged after completing all of your classes and probation, is your record visible when doing a background check? Lower man?
To start off with, we're in an area of what we call expungements or cleaning a record, okay? And what you have just mentioned is that you're saying that the bottom line is you got your record expunged. Now, of course, to do that, you have completed all of your classes and you're done with probation to do that. When you say visible, what you're talking about is probably what is going to show on my rap sheet, okay? What is going to show on your rap sheet is that you have the crime there, the arrest. You may have the disposition of the crime, but it should say dismissed pursuant to 1203.4 PC.
If you are in California.
Correct.
So when we're talking about, there's some criminal laws that we will talk about that are constitutional, and then they apply to all of the states, all 50 of the United States, right? But there are some that are specific to California. So the penal code section that he just mentioned is a California penal code section relating to expunging the record. What we do want you to understand is that expungement in California is not the same thing as erasing the record.
Exactly.
It does not erase it.
Right.
The arrest will still show, and the outcome will still show. It will just show that on whatever date you came in and got the expungement motion granted, that at that point it was dismissed.
Correct. And then the question really becomes, well, what can I say about it? Even though I do it, can I tell the world I don't have a conviction anymore? Can I declare on an application I don't have a conviction? Well, you want to take that one, Karin?
You can, depending on the circumstance. There are some agencies that you must always list, even if you got the crime expunged, you still must notify them of that. Examples are the California Lottery,
yes.
Any law enforcement agency,
state licenses,
yes,
state
licensing boards,
car seller, real estate insurance, selling insurance, regular insurance, real estate, I guess, property, but selling insurance. All of them require the state to give you a license. And the key is going to be what was on the application, what was on the question. Even private employers, that question that they ask about your background is really key because it's going to come in 3 areas usually. And this is the smart part. You know you have your record expunged, right? It's all gone. But they ask a question like, have you ever been arrested before? Okay. Now that seems kind of vague. It seems like, hey, that might be improper and stuff. But depending on what you're applying for, if that's the question, that's what they're asking. Of course, even if you had it expunged, the answer would be yes. However, that matter was dismissed pursuant to 1203.4. See, that's what you write down. You want to let them know that the matter's been dismissed when they ask about just an arrest. Now, then it wraps up from there because you've seen where they'll say, well, hey, do you have any traffic tickets? Misdemeanors, you see, something like that. That means that they're asking specifically about traffic tickets and misdemeanors. And if you had them, you may have to report them. But the real key becomes this. You look at the question itself. Because if they want you to report something about a background, a criminal background, and you have had something expunged through 1203.4, you're going to see on the application, they will warn you. Tell us about that, even if it's been dismissed pursuant to 1203.4.
Now we have another question, and that is from Christina, indicating, I thought there was a California ban the box law.
Ban the box. What is that?
That is is a law specifically that limits what employers can ask you about.
Yeah. And that's been recent. Yeah, I know what you mean now. The labor laws have now changed to where, yes, they are restricted from asking you things. But remember, an employer may put it there anyway. Now, in those cases, and I'll tell you, yeah.
So in regards to that, what happens is that the employer is not supposed to ask about those issues until they've actually made you an offer for the job.
Right.
At that point, then they can ask questions about your background, but they are supposed to give you, if they find something in your background that they find objectionable, they are supposed to give you an opportunity to explain the situation.
Right, before they take action. And I would believe there's a thing called due process, which means you got to notice me of some action against me and then give me an opportunity to be heard. So you want to ask for a hearing or anything that's available so that you can then present whatever is necessary to show what exactly happened.
So again, the ban the box just prohibits them from asking before they give you that conditional offer of employment. Once they give you that conditional offer of employment and you're going to accept, they can ask those questions and they can look into your background. But again, they have to give you the opportunity to explain anything in your background that they find objectionable.
And I've heard that some people I know some people will get the job, they'll be there a month or so, and a background check will come back, and then they get fired, or asked to leave. Now we're talking about possibly looking to the labor board or an attorney to deal with that issue. Because if in fact you were not given that opportunity to explain, then you may complain about that.
And there may be some civil action that you may be able to bring in that particular instance.
Yeah. But back on. You're going. Go ahead. No, you go.
I was just going to take us back to again talking about the criminal process and what happens after you're arrested, and not limited to DUI.
Oh no, for sure.
What else should someone expect after they've been arrested? They've been booked into the jail.
Yes. Now comes the time for what's called the arraignment date. Okay. But before that, you may have an opportunity to bail out. The first thing that's going to happen is somebody's going to interview you, and they will be from what they call pretrial services. Pretrial services will take information from you. And what they're gauging is, can I verify that information? Can I verify you live where you said you live? Can I verify you have a job? And other information you will fill out. And when you do verify it, or they do verify it, they will give you a score. I believe it's 1 to 6 now. And that 1 to 6 score will be a level at which they can OR you or release you on your own recognizance. Now, you may still have a bail too, because not everybody gets OR'd. And sometimes a bail is necessary. But that person interviewing you, it's important to be honest and truthful, and because
they should not be asking you any questions about the crime. It should just be questions about your background.
That's right.
Where do you work? Who can they call to verify that? Where do you live? How long have you lived there?
Yep.
Who's your next of kin contact person? We do have another question here in the chat from Sheepdog Protector. It says, I have had USCCA for 5 years. Are they known for getting you good lawyers? I have not had to use them, but just wondering since carry them at all times. Are you familiar with that organization? It sounds like it may be one of those prepaid.
A legal plan or something like that.
So we
Yeah.
can't really speak to whether they, whether or not they provide good attorneys or not. We would assume that perhaps that they provide attorneys
Yeah.
who are efficient, but we can't speak to that. That's not.
But through our magical powers, we're about to learn what that means. Okay. Well, that makes sense.
So we still can't say the level of expertise of the attorneys that particular organization utilizes.
Right. And what it does mean for everyone is the U.S. Concealed Carry Association. Now, because it's a U.S. Concealed Carry Association, it sounds like something that's optional to join, that you don't have to be a member of it. But when you say that they've been getting good, or they get you good lawyers.
I think the person is asking, are they known for getting good
Oh,
lawyers?
are they known?
Yeah,
okay.
And so I don't think we can speak to that.
Right.
We don't know. But
okay.
Want to, whoever your attorney is, you want to make sure that you vet that person and that you are comfortable with that person, because you're going to need to share confidential information with them, and you're going to have to work to strategize on your defense.
Now I'll tell you something, and this is, I think, what that really is saying. It is an association who, I guess, will say they will provide lawyers for you if something goes wrong in a concealed carry situation. And now, for people who don't know what that means that you can carry a firearm basically concealed in California. I mean, we have that here. It's all over. Some people have open carry. When they say open carry, meaning I can put it on my side, my hip, I can have it anywhere. But that organization, what he's saying is, when something happens, then will they provide good legal counsel? And that I could not answer because I don't know the organization and the lawyers they refer you to. But though usually the way it works is they do have lawyers that they consult with, lawyers that may be on their payroll that will step in and help individuals who are members of the organization.
Many times, a lot of the prepaid legal services is not going to cover as much as you think it's going to cover. So it may pay for your initial consultation with an attorney. It usually does not cover the cost of full representation on a criminal case.
And concealed carry, if in fact you have qualified and you have your concealed carry card, to need that lawyer, something has went wrong somewhere. Either law enforcement is challenging whether it's true or not, or they're acting beyond what the rules are in terms of carrying a weapon. Maybe saying that you're not carrying it properly, you're not doing something properly. So even though you're a concealed carrier holder, there are still rules regarding concealed carry that has to be followed.
So we have another question that's appeared in the email, and that question is, and it's specifically for a lawman. That question is, am I allowed to carry my firearm in my vehicle if it is in the glove box?
All right. Interesting question, but a lot of people got to know. Look, right now, the way the law is right now, there are ways that you can carry your weapon. Why would I need to carry a weapon and I don't have it concealed? Because I may go to the range, I may go to sell it, I may go to bring it to another house, a place, a dwelling. There are various reasons why I want to carry my weapon. Now, the general rule.
Well, that's not really, is that a carry or is that a transport?
Well, transport, but you carry as you transport. Because what if I'm transporting and I'm actually on a skateboard? Or I'm actually on a bicycle. See, I don't have anywhere to lock my weapon up or to put the magazine and bullets away from the other
Well, actually, you would still need something if
You would,
you didn't have a
that's
permit.
right.
So if you're on your skateboard with your weapon
That's
and
right.
you do not have a permit to carry it on your person concealed,
Here's
you
what,
better have it in a locked container.
well, and sometimes, well, weapons usually they'll come with their own lockbox, that the weapon may come in, that can be locked. But you can buy small locks that you run through the barrel and through the trigger area, and it's a lock that's on it so that no one can utilize that weapon without the key and opening it up.
Ma'am, we have another question in the email, and that is, if I purchase a firearm on the street, can I carry that if I have it in a locked container?
All right, let me go back to the other one first because I got to be clear. Look, we're kidding with. I mean, we're not kidding with a skateboard and all that stuff. I'm not kidding. The way to carry a weapon and the general rule is that the magazine, the bullets, shall be separately locked from the weapon itself. Now, there are various ways to do that. If you say, I just have it in the glove box and the magazine is in the weapon and it's loaded, that's not the way to carry it. By locking the glove box, that's not the way to carry it because they're together. The reason for illegal carry is because the bullets are readily accessible to the firearm. So if you just put it in two different places in the car, that may not be enough. So if it's in the glove box, yeah, no. Now
the glove box is not, even if your glove box is locked,
right,
that is not considered a locked container.
The proper way.
Purposely for transporting your weapon.
Right. Now the other person says, hey, I bought it off the street. So can I now carry it? Well, think about what I just said. The problem becomes not how you carry it if it is separate, but who you bought it from.
Well, let's say this. There's still a problem with the carry, but there are additional problems that come with a weapon that you have purchased on the street.
Because all weapons should be purchased through dealers, weapons dealers. Unless it can be, I think, passed down through inheritance.
I think that transfer still needs to, if it was a weapon that was registered to someone else,
right?
And let's say your father has passed on, and you now want to possess that weapon, that transfer still needs to occur through a legitimate gun dealer.
Yes, and because what they're going to check is the seller and the buyer, and see whether they're qualified to have the weapon. Qualified meaning you do not have a conviction of a felony or other offense that disqualifies you from having the weapon.
So there appears to be, it's not really a question, but a statement in the chat that there is no legal way in California to buy a firearm on the street. And that is actually true. You need to go through an armed dealer in order to make that transfer.
Right. And let's just say what she's talking about, the passing of the weapon.
And we don't mean just purchasing for money. We mean, even if your friend on the street is like, hey, I just came across this weapon and I'm willing to give it to you. If they're not the registered owner, they can't transfer it to you.
Right.
And the only way they could transfer it to you lawfully would be through a dealer.
And that's very important to think about, because you may think I've done what's necessary. I paid them some money, they gave me the gun. But there's a specific penal code section dealing with having a gun that is not registered to you. It may be registered to your wife, your spouse, or mom or pop, but it's not registered to you. So that's the first thing. There is a penal code section regarding that. It's a wobbler. But the
wobbler meaning,
felony misdemeanor.
These terms of art, we need to explain them to the public. Some people know, but others do not. A wobbler means it's a crime that can be charged either as a felony or as a misdemeanor.
Right. Now, there are some weapons that are sold that the registration numbers have been shaved off. Possessing that weapon would be illegal, you see? So those two situations, just possessing that weapon causes the violation of the crime. So
No
whether you
matter how
carried
you're
it,
carrying
right,
it.
exactly.
You could actually have it in a locked
Yep,
container, but if law enforcement legally discovers that weapon,
right.
there are like a
Yeah,
number of charges that could be
from that. Yeah. And now,
arise as a
and I'll tell you
result.
something, people want weapons. We all want guns. We love that stuff. But you really got to be careful about how you carry. So the bottom line on the carry though is magazine out, lock up the weapon. And it's easier to use one of those little ties, that goes through so that it can't automatically, you can't put the magazine in and fire it right away. So that's the bottom line, is lock the two apart. Okay. Then don't have a weapon that's not registered to you. Okay. And if you're unsure and someone sells you one and you go in to register it, there may be a danger in that someone, says, you have purchased a weapon illegally. So, you just got to be careful of that, because gun dealers are the ones who should transfer. So, but going back, Carm, back to the process, right?
So
And
now I've been arrested, I've been booked in, I would actually was OR'd and I was released from jail and they gave me a date where I'm to show back up to court. What's going to happen to me on that date? Am I going back into custody, lawman?
no, not generally, okay? But here's what the importance of that date is, that it's your arraignment date. So whether you stayed in jail or not and couldn't bail, within 48 hours, you will be brought before a judge.
And that's been modified because of the pandemic here in
Right.
California. So you will not be brought before the judge within 48 hours because of the pandemic. The time period has been extended to 7 days, and that is because they're trying to quarantine new people that are in the jail, and have them quarantined for a sufficient time period where if they had COVID, hopefully they would
run its course. Yeah. And but you have a right to be brought before that judge, and that judge just has a couple of things to do. They need to find out if you are who you are at that first court date. And what's really important is we have to get you a lawyer at that first court date. That's what the court's concerned about, is, do you want a lawyer? Now, of course you do.
There's another, which we were just going to address, but there's an email question, and that question is that there changes in the bail system because of the pandemic, and there actually were in California certain crimes, the bail, general felonies, the bail is set at 0. And what that means is if you're charged with that crime, there's not the bail amount is going to be $0, which means that you will actually be released.
Right. Exactly.
Now that doesn't apply. There's certain crimes that does not apply to, specifically strike crimes,
serious or violent,
yes,
right?
Serious or violent crimes.
Sex crimes.
Yes. In those cases, there is a bail schedule that is set, and the court is sticking to that bail schedule.
Right, and might even be in domestic violence cases too. They usually throw that in there, as something that they want a bail to be set because of the danger of someone getting out right away.
Yes, and so at that court date, the arraignment, what is going to happen is you are going to be told by the court what the charges are against you if the district attorney has actually filed charges.
Right.
So in the meantime, what happened after you were arrested is that the officer prepared a report and he submitted that report to the district attorney's office. The district attorney is going to review that report and make a decision about whether or not to file charges and what those charges will be. So sometimes what will happen is the officer may arrest you on 6 different crimes. And when you get to court, you're actually only charged with 1 or 2 crimes. Also, the opposite could happen.
Yes.
Sometimes the officer only arrests you for 1 particular crime, but by the time you get to court, the district attorney has reviewed his report and determined, wait, no, there's actually 5 crimes that we can charge this person with. But the arraignment is the formal process where you find out what the charges are against you. Now, those could change as the process goes on, but those are your initial charges that you're dealing with.
And know that the police are not the ones who make the decision on the charges, except for to make the arrest.
So you could be booked in. They decide what they're going to book you on, but it is the district attorney who decides what charges they're actually going to file against you.
Now you said something like, I get to court and they say, hey, you're on the no complaint file calendar.
And that may mean that the district attorney has not decided whether or not they're going to file charges against you. And generally on misdemeanors, they have 1 year from the time the misdemeanor occurred to make a decision as to whether or not they're going to file you. And on general felonies, they have 3 years.
If it is, yes, on a general felony.
General felonies.
The rule is the statute of limitations would be the limitation time. So if you've got a felony that goes up to 5 years, like a robbery, they got 5 years. But general felonies, 1623, so 3 years.
And not applicable, of course, to crimes like
murder. Right.
How long do they have to file?
Life. Life. They can get you anytime in your life.
Now, I do see that we have a question here in the chat from Borkai. It says, so someone I know took his wife's car from her stating she drinks and drives. She needs to get to work. How can she get her car back? Will they blood test her? That involves a little bit of a civil issue. Yeah. Because it sounds like that there's a husband and wife, and he's taking the car from her because he's concerned that she drinks and drives. That's more of it's a community property. Yes. So they both have a right to possess that car.
If it's community property.
That's true. Assuming that it's community property, that it was bought during the course of the marriage. Would be the thing that would make it community property, and then they both have.
What does that mean? Exactly, they both have equal rights to that car
to possess it.
So you really, well, I guess it begs the question. Hey, I'm going to just take the car. What you gonna do about it, wife? Right? I'm just gonna take the car.
I'm gonna divorce you and sue you. I'm gonna divorce you, and in the suit, I'm gonna ask that the car be awarded to me.
But it causes a lot of friction. There's things that's going on because technically you both do own that car, unless
so law enforcement in that instance is probably not going to come out and say, well, you got to give her the car back to let her get to work. They're going to come out and they're going to say, you know what, this is a civil issue. This is a family law issue for you guys to work out.
And I think the last thing that they were saying was, will they blood test her? Well, no. If she's not driving, then there's no suspicion of a crime or anything like that. You know, it's more of a civil issue that they got to work out. Okay. Now, back to that process, though. Okay, so I get to court. And there's no complaint filed. They tell me, hey, we haven't filed a complaint. You told me that, well, it can mean that the DAs haven't decided yet, right? And they do. They have a right to wait to decide what the charge would be. And it can also mean that no charges are coming at all. So the DAs can actually refuse to file. Now, knowing that difference will be difficult, but here's the key. The key will be if they say, well, we haven't filed yet, but we want you to come back in 6 weeks. They give you a further court date and they haven't filed. That means that they are going to contemplate filing, and most likely they will at some point. If they tell you, we just dropped it, we refused to file, that means they found out that you were not, they didn't have, here's the magical word again, probable cause to either arrest you for that crime and hold you for that crime.
Now, I would state that it's pretty rare that they will actually state that they, or at least in my experience, that they will actually state that they are refusing to file. They will just indicate that no charges have been filed against you.
Now, sometimes you know what they do, though. They won't be out on the outer calendar, but the calendar that the bailiff will hold will delineate that. And, you know, that they refuse to file versus that they not filed.
And what Mr. Staten is talking about in terms of the calendar is basically a document in Sacramento County at least prior to the pandemic, they used to post it outside of the courtroom,
Right.
that had the cases that were on in that particular department on that particular day. In other counties, they don't actually display a paper calendar, and right now Sacramento is not doing that because of the pandemic. But in other counties, they will have a digital camera or a digital calendar where you can actually look at the screen, kind of like what you would see in an airport, and it shows the names of all the cases that are on that day.
Right. And if you don't see your name, then you want to get the bailiff's attention if you can, and just to be sure that you haven't missed the date, because what if you're just a day or two off and you walk away and you're not thinking about it, and then that day comes and goes, there could be a bench warrant out for you.
That is true. And in Sacramento County, there is also a Sacramento County criminal index. So you can look yourself up using that criminal index by your name. I think there's a fee like $1 or $2 if you look yourself up by your name. But if you know your X reference number, which is a number that the county assigns to an individual who's been arrested or who has had a background check.
Right.
You can use that number. You can use that number to enter into the system to check and see whether or not you have a court date that shows in the system.
And just to be clear, we're talking about you put on Superior Court of Sacramento index. Something like that.
Criminal
index. Anything like that. And it will actually come up and it will guide you how you find yourself or anyone else, actually.
And a number of the other counties as well have their own systems. So you would just research for the particular county that you were appearing in, do a Google search for that county.
Superior
and
if
they have an index, it will come up.
Definitely. Now, so
back to the criminal process. So now you've been arraigned, you've had that court date.
Right.
You have either told them that you will retain an attorney, or they have appointed you an attorney, whether that's a public defender or a conflict criminal defender here in Sacramento, and they will give you a next court date.
Well, I hear that public defenders are not lawyers. I hear they work for the DA. Is that true, Carl?
Public defenders are attorneys. They've gone to law school. They've taken the state bar. They are attorneys. It's just that they are employed by the county. They do not work for the district attorney's office. They work for the Sacramento County Public Defender's Office, or whichever county that you're in, their public defender's office. There's some counties that don't actually have public defender's offices, and what they do is they contract with private attorneys to represent the people who are accused and can't afford their own counsel.
Right.
I believe that
I see that question. Yeah, we've kind of moved into the next part, because either you bought your lawyer, you've hired your lawyer, or you get one appointed. But there was a question about how can lawyers practice in multiple jurisdictions, in multiple states? And because when they see a Black person gets killed, they see the same guy. And I bet you it's Ben Crump, basically. Okay, Crump shows up pretty much at the scene of everything. Here's how that works. If I wanted to practice in another state, what I would need to do is have a sponsor in that state or associate with someone in that state.
Or you could be licensed. You can take an attorney can take multiple bar exams. So you could be an attorney licensed in as many states as you can sit for the bar exam in.
Right. But nobody does it. Nobody wants to do it. You don't want to do that.
No one wants to do it for every single state.
Right.
That would be just a
time-consuming
process
and might not be necessary. But yes, you practice in the other state by utilizing a lawyer that is already there and associating with them.
With that person.
Right. And that's how you can show up in different states and you really act like, well, I'm their lawyer, but you're not their sole lawyer. You see, you're part of a team of individuals.
One of whom is licensed
in that state. Yeah.
I see another question. If you get pulled over, this is coming from Sean. If you get pulled over, can you refuse to roll down your window? Lawman?
Let's see. Well, the way it works is this. Usually, The only reason you would roll it down is to hand something to them. Okay.
Well, wouldn't you roll it down so that the officer can hear you or you can hear the officer?
Not necessarily. Now, you gotta, if in fact you're gonna take the position of I'm not rolling it down.
Well, the officer has ordered me to roll my window down, lawman. What do? The officer has said, ma'am, lower your window.
Well, what you probably would do is first you're saying, am I free to go? And the officer says, heck no. Okay, just establish that.
Well, he says he can't hear me. I say that, and he says, I can't hear you. Let your window down.
Then you may crack it enough for the sound to come through.
Because, but what if I don't want to crack it? Can I just outright refuse? I'm not letting my window down.
You can. You can refuse. Now, what will happen next? It gets confusing because is the officer really going to break a window in order to listen to you if you are yelling?
We know. We can talk about what should happen in theory, and we can talk about what we know might happen if you run up against the wrong officer. The wrong officer may just take out his weapon and crack that window. The wrong officer may just take out his weapon and shoot through that window because he says, not only could I not hear her, but I felt like she was reaching around in her vehicle and I felt threatened. So again, as we have said in prior episodes, what we want everyone to be able to do is to make it through alive in these interactions with law enforcement. So crack your window and say, am I free to leave?
Exactly.
If the officer says, no, you're not free to leave, dumb bitch. Can't you see I done pulled you over? Hell no, you're not free to leave. I'm standing at your window and you can see my badge. You're not free to leave. What do you do at that point, lawman?
Then you are now detained and you may give them your license because you're detained and you want to give them the documents at that point, but you want to talk to your lawyer. You might also say,
well, what do you mean by I want to talk to my lawyer?
Well,
what do I say?
You will tell them, I want to talk to my lawyer. I want my lawyer.
So you identify yourself with your driver's license or your ID. If you're driving, of course, you provide your proof of registration and insurance if you have it, but you don't go beyond that in terms of statements. You don't need to tell the officer where you're going, where you're coming from, who you were with, what your plans are. You've provided your identification, and that is sufficient.
Now, check this out. Look, when we're talking about an officer breaking a window, okay, you don't want to, of course, antagonize anyone. It's a passive position to say that I want my lawyer. Now, your hands, now here is where the interpretation of what you're doing can be misconstrued. If I am saying, fuck no, I'll open the door, and I'm yelling, and I'm screaming, and I am reaching across the seat, I'm doing something, that's where now the officer can create a suspicion that something may be wrong.
Let me just say this. This brings to mind a case that we all saw, and we actually saw on Facebook Live because Philando Castile's girlfriend had the wherewithal to record it. He was complying with the officer. And he knew, okay, this is an officer. I know I have my gun, my registered gun with me. I want to let him know. And he tells the officer, and the officer's like, oh, well, just don't reach for it. And he doesn't reach for it. He's trying to hand I believe the officer his registration and insurance information. And the officer shot and killed him. So sometimes you can be doing everything right, and you run into that wrong officer who's trigger happy, and you end up dead.
Now, that's an interesting case to look at, because when you really look at the videos, the officer that fired was a younger officer than the other. The older officer was on, I believe, the side of the window where Philando was. He was a passenger in the vehicle. And basically...
No, Philando was the driver.
No, the girlfriend was the driver because she was filming it all.
Looking at the opposite side.
Right. The guy, the cop was angry on Philando's side first, and he went around to her side because she had the camera up the whole particular time. and he was a passenger, and he began to lean forward like the glove box or the center console or something. But he was telling them, like any CCW holder, one of your duties, your first duties, is to tell the officers that you are a CCW holder and where the weapon is. See, that's a condition of keeping that license to hold it, is that if law enforcement stops you, you got to tell them that. And once you do tell them that, that should be enough. And if the only thing they can get is, let me see your CCW card, okay, and look at it. And that's where it went all wrong, was because he was actually reaching to get that. And that's not the only case where that happens. So in those situations, just like the broken window.
I just want to correct you, because I thought that I was right on that. He was the driver. He's the driver. She's seated in the passenger seat, and their child was in the back seat. He was the driver.
Sure.
Yeah, he was the driver. Right. She was the front seat passenger. I remember that, because he's the driver and she's in the passenger seat, and she starts filming from the passenger seat. Because
their kid gets out later. And I thought
their kid is in the back seat.
Right. Okay. Okay, if that's what, I don't know, is that the case? Or what are you reading now? Okay. All right, if that's the case, in those situations, just like the window down thing, what you're trying to do is stay safe. And you can stay safe if you articulate, officer, I am in fear. I'm going to keep my hands right here. Now, if you, officer, want to come in and grab something, you can, but I'm going to keep my hands right here. Now, the thing that they will say is you're not complying, right, with their orders, but really you are. You are making the situation safe for the both of you. At that time, Philando Castile and that officer, whether he was on the left or the right side, the officer did what I call, well, I don't know if I can say it in the way, but he panicked, so to speak. He panicked. And why did he panic? Because he's a trained officer. Why? We probably won't know that, but he panicked, and you can see it coming on in the video because it was a time period that went by, and you can see it in his eyes that he was panicking. Now, I've seen other videos where officers will say, go get your ID. There's one that stands out where a guy gets out of a truck and he's jumping out at the same time the cop is walking up. And he is actually startled by the cop when he turns around and his door is open still. He throws his hands up because the cop came at him with a weapon. And it seemed to be a traffic violation. He's in front of like a mini mart or something. And as he's standing there, and the cop is telling him, get your ID. And he reaches in, and the cop shoots him. Now, there are some things that just are unexplainable in those situations. And we as society, we as the public must scrutinize those situations, because an officer can tell you all day that they are in fear. But truthfully, it doesn't match what the law would say about putting one in fear. If I do not have a weapon and you do, if I'm not running or doing anything and you're approaching me with your weapon, then who do you think is really being put in fear? It's easy to say, well, I'm in fear of the unknown because I don't know you, but it's not logical for us to believe that to be true. Yeah, and not reasonable. And so it's those situations that are the most egregious, whereby an individual is actually complying with an officer and yet gets shot. And we're never going to be able to explain that stuff. And it's those that we got to focus on when it comes to community groups, community organizations, and things like that.
Explain it. I think that we can explain it. There is an irrational fear of brown skin. There is a fear that when you see someone who is African American, that person is more likely to be criminal or to be a threat. And that is why you will see people like, and this has been mentioned many times, Dylan Roof, who shot up a church full of people and who is polite. And so they knew he was armed and who is politely arrested. I think they might have even taken him for a meal at McDonald's or Burger King. The shooter in the shooter
Mr.
at
Blake.
the theater.
Okay.
The shooter at the theater.
Denver.
Colorado.
Colorado.
In Colorado, who shot up a theater full of people, and yet he was taken without being killed. Kyle Rittenhouse.
Rittenhouse.
Yeah, is that who you were thinking of?
No, I was thinking of all the countless other situations where people who do not have melatonin in their skin will actually fight with officers.
And they still make it out of those incidents alive. I think you sent me a
that video
where there was a male, not melanated male, who was fighting with two officers who actually took the officer's billy club or nightstick, whatever it's called now, and is beating one officer with it. There are two officers there, mind you, and the officer does not take out a gun and shoot that man. In addition, he goes further and actually jumps into the officer's patrol car and drives away. And guess what? They don't shoot at him. How is that possible?
The door, trying to open the door.
How is that possible?
Yeah.
How is that possible? Someone who actually was a threat to you, who was physically beating your partner with the billy club, does not get shot.
Right.
But an African American person who has no weapon gets shot when they are running away from you.
Complying with what you said. Now, you know what? It's funny because it always comes around to that. I dig what you're saying. Is that fear? Is it this institutionalized racism type of thing that goes on? Because why would you fear me if you don't know me?
And if I've done nothing to cause you fear and you don't know anything about me. Right. There's just in these interactions we're seeing, and what else can it be explained by other than inherent racism? How do you explain what happened at the Sandra Bland traffic stop? The officer, because she wanted to smoke in her own vehicle and would not stop smoking in her own vehicle, resulted in him then getting her out of the car and basically dumping her on her head, body slamming her. How does that happen? Why does that happen? She didn't have a weapon. She hadn't physically threatened him, but he thought that those actions exercised against an African-American female would be okay.
Gardner. We can talk about Gardner, because for me, Gardner is very historic. Okay, and if we don't learn from that, we have a problem. 30 years before Gardner, Radio Raheem in the movie Do the Right Thing, Spike Lee movie, Radio Raheem was actually choked out in pretty much the same way by the New York City Police Department. And we saw in Gardner, what he was doing was what? Selling loosies?
Garner,
sorry.
Mm-hmm.
Selling loosies, okay? Now, cigarettes on the street, okay? That's it. When you see the officers confront
so not a
him,
felony. That's not a felony in New York. It's a misdemeanor, right?
At most, I would hope. But the point being, he merely began to walk away. But they surrounded him.
Which you've said that if we don't want to have consensual contact, now people are looking and they're saying, Lawman and Carmen B, you told us if we don't want to have contact when they approach us, that we can walk away. But look what happened to this man when he walked away.
That's right. But I will say, I don't believe he said, am I free to go? You see, and establish that. And if they had said, no, you're not, then you would not be free to go. And you are officially detained. But I'm going to give them the benefit. I'm going to say, okay, he was, because he did not run away. He was not trying to escape away. But what we got to note is this. When you watch, there are about 6, 7 officers who surround him. They want to stop him. He is a very large Black man. So to do that, they began to what I would call attack. We've seen that in like the animal kingdom and stuff, really, is when hyenas and wolves, they surround their prey and they attack. Now, when they attacked him, that's when the damage began to be done. There really was no reason to attack him, but that's what they did. Multiple officers on that man. He then is choked out. In the same move, Radio Raheem is choked out. And you got to wonder why, and they started banning chokeholds and things like that, thereafter, claiming that it's the chokehold that's doing it and not the people behind it, right? When real policies just don't force people to act properly. It's sort of like, the line in the song, law doesn't change another's mind when all they see at the hiring time is the line on the color bar. So you can have all the policies you want. You can have all the laws you want to try to protect you. But if someone doesn't see it because they are color focused, your color triggers them, then it won't matter. It won't matter. Not at all. They will do what I will call a crime itself. But why should we let them get away with it? Well, those are questions and answers and things that I would love to discuss, and I think we probably will get around to dealing with, is how come and why that is continuing to happen.
We're seeing in the chat a comment from Mr. Mack that there was the African-American gentleman that was killed for jaywalking, and that is true. We did talk about that in one of our earlier
very similar to Gardner in a way, where he's just trying to walk away.
And again, the violation, and again with that one, the officers weren't even sure that he had actually jaywalked.
Right.
So they weren't really stopping him for a crime because they weren't sure that a crime had even been committed. And it's
the suspicion that he was doing something was not strong at all.
Not at all.
No, and so it comes down to deeper issues. It definitely does.
It does. And we need, number one, there needs to be additional training for officers. There needs to be a different agency that deals with people who are suffering from a mental illness, because we've seen a number of instances where law enforcement responds because the family has called concerned for their loved one, and then it results in law enforcement killing their loved one.
That happened here in Sacramento with Mr. Mann. We see that happening. I remember in Florida, a guy who was the caretaker for the mentally ill gentleman were in the middle of the street, and the police got there, and one cop fired on the caretaker. I mean, he literally didn't know what was going on, that the caretaker was actually calming the guy down. And I look at those, and you know what, Carm? What always comes down to is there's a rogueness about it, a rogueness. There's something that takes it out of the realm of logic and reason so far that all we can do is sort of wonder why. Why are they doing that? But we've been doing that for quite a long time, of the why, because there is no training that's going to help that person, probably none whatsoever. I mean, if I come to the scene,
you're right. For someone who has the mindset that every time they see an African American person, they're responding to a scene with an African American person, that person must be a criminal, and therefore they can treat them in any which way they so feel, that person does not need to be on the force. And so there needs to be better vetting for these officers.
Yeah.
And there was another case that happened here in Sacramento with a person where I believe initially law enforcement was called because they felt that the person may have been under the influence or was acting a little bit weird, and that was Marshall Miles. And that case, I believe, is still pending. In that instance, he's arrested. He appears to be, maybe he's upset about something. He's arrested. Law enforcement takes him into the jail. Officers dogpile on him. The video was released. He's telling them that, he feels like he can't breathe. And the officer, this is a mistake that officers make. They assume that if somebody is talking, that person is then fine. And just within a very short time period after officer telling him, well, you're fine because you're talking to me, even though officers are dogpiled on him, a very short time later, he is then loses consciousness. He's taken to the hospital and never recovers.
We've seen that with Floyd, with McLean, that I can't breathe phraseology, is no joke, it means that someone's in danger.
And I see the comment from Borkai that what needs to happen is to weed out the white supremacists.
Yeah.
And from what we're seeing, we have to believe that they have infiltrated law enforcement in every state. And that's partly to explain for these instances that you can't see that this person, that your job is to detain them. Your job is not to make a judgment. Your job is not to be, you're not the judge and you are not the jury.
Right.
And you certainly are not the executioner and don't have the right to take the life of someone because they've been accused of a crime, no matter how heinous that crime. Because if you can take in Dylan Roof, who killed how many people in a church, you can take in African-American people without killing them.
And I'll bring up 2 points. Snoop Dogg was mentioning about lynching. And that's exactly in my PowerPoints and what I preach is that what you're seeing is a lynching, because the definition of that is depriving the criminal justice process from doing what they need to do. And that's what these things are. And the George Floyd one was different because everybody got to watch it from beginning to end. Everyone got to watch it. If you even take Mr. McDonald from Chicago about 5 years ago, people will say, well, he was crazy, he was running with a knife. Okay. The interesting thing, and I see this starting to show up, and this is what we're talking about. There are already other cops that might be there dealing with the person. There are other cops that are around. There's a rogue person who comes in and decides they're going to handle this situation and they're going to shoot. I mean, I remember the brother who, from the air, the helicopter people were talking about, oh, look at that big black guy.
Oh, yeah. The gentleman who was actually, I believe, stopped because his car was broken down.
Right. He was right. And he had his hands up and he was going to the car as they were telling him to do. And the lady cop, pow. He said, you're complying. There's a rogue individual somewhere who comes in to do something. The Philando Castile, the same way. The other cop was right there. But this cop felt the need to do something about it. And so it's beginning to be a pattern of activity of where there may be other cops that are there who responded and they're going, hey, he's just crazy. We're just going to wait till he calms down or something. But someone comes in, pow, because they're controlling the show.
Now,
so, no. I mean, I'm just going to say we have to draw together the similarities of these things to see exactly what they are and to address them for what they are. That's why weeding them out, trying to keep them from coming in, almost an impossibility because you don't know which one is going to turn. They always say, right, there's good cops. I believe it. There's good people everywhere. But when I don't know and I can't tell the good ones from the bad ones, it's always a danger zone.
If you're a good one, but you stand by and watch a bad one kill somebody or beat them senseless, then you're not a good one.
Right. Yeah. I mean, that's aiding and abetting practically. I mean, you're allowing something to occur that you may know is wrong.
I want to note Christina made a statement that after they kill, they do a payout justice. And the taxpayers pay it, not the cops. And
That's right.
that is true.
That is
That is
exactly
true.
true. And they may even get rewarded by move to another jurisdiction, or hey, remember was it no, the cop, Chauvin, right, in Floyd. Remember who surrounded his house and protected him? Cops came out to protect him from the public. They felt that, and that's the funny part, because that means the cops knew he had done something that the public was going to object to enough to where if they knew where he lived, they may come and blow his house down. So the cops came out to protect him. Now, see, that kind of stuff, makes you shake your head and you go, well, wait a minute. How's that happen in my country? How's that happen in the land of the free, right? And things like that.
Because that's that blue line. And they're never going to look at what he did, his cop buddies who came to protect him. Yeah. They're never going to look at what he did as wrong.
Right.
They think he was doing his job. Because he was justified.
Silent supporting, that person who stands on the sideline, who does nothing. In fact, that's becoming up again and talked about, all the time. And it comes back to the World War II, where the guy was talking about, they came for the socialists, and I didn't do nothing because I wasn't a socialist. They came for this group, and I didn't do nothing because I wasn't them. Yeah. They came for the Jews, and I didn't do anything. But in the end, they came for you. And there'll be nobody left.
And so what we have to do, of course, we as individuals can't stop all of these incidents from occurring. But we're hoping that if people follow what we're instructing people to do, that we can at least lessen some of them. Ask the officer if you're free to leave. If he tells you that you are not free to leave, understand that you are detained. You don't have to make any further statements other than giving your identification to the officer and demanding your attorney. And
wait. You got to wait it out. Even people, I watch videos of people who are legitimately making arguments to the officer. Well, I know my rights, so I can do this and do that. But I go, you're wasting your time, because you're arguing something that they don't obviously believe in, or that they're not going to follow.
Sometimes you will. I've seen videos where a person argues with the cop, and in the end, the cop lets them go. But I've seen many other videos where it goes wrong for the person. And so we're telling you, you don't need to have that argument. You let us have that argument for you in court, or civil attorneys have that argument for you in court.
Exactly.
Do you want to address what happened today in terms of the announcement?
I understand that there was a 27 million settlement made in Floyd. And then something about the Australian woman, 20 million or something paid out. I don't know if that was also today.
I don't think that was. I think that was just a comparison. I don't think that was today.
But the Minneapolis City Council approved a settlement, 27 mil.
But that doesn't bring Floyd back to his family.
And
so that the public understands this. Yeah. When you hear 27 million, his family is not getting 27 million because there are fees for the attorneys that file that case on behalf of the family. And those fees usually range anywhere from 25% to 33%.
40 if you go to trial.
Of that settlement amount. And yes, if a case goes to trial, even 40. And it can be higher.
Yeah, and then cost of the suit.
And all of that gets subtracted from this settlement. And so the family, even though it's put out to the public, the family is getting 27 million. It's a $27 million settlement. No, the family, the attorney's fees have to come out of there. The costs have to come out of there. And so we're talking a range of anywhere probably between
9 to 10 when it comes down to it.
Yeah, 9 to 10 million coming out of that 27 million, and the family will get what's left once those fees are paid.
And then what family gets it? Because, I may have many different members of my family who file. But I think one thing about that is money's never going to bring anybody back. It's just not. You know, it's our civil system of compensation that we can pay people for a life. When really, what is a life worth? You know, yeah,
The other thing is there have been many cases where the person is killed by law
yeah,
enforcement and the family is not paid a
at all.
dime.
That's right.
And again, no amount of money is going to bring back your loved one.
Right.
No amount of money is going to allow you to hug that person again,
Qualified immunity.
to call that person and talk to them again. There's a good comment from Christina. They are going to take you to jail anyway.
Right.
Don't talk yourself out of it. They will
right.
use it all against you in their report. I'm not talking. I want my lawyer. I don't consent to any search.
Right.
Christina has been watching.
That's right.
Christina knows her rights and knows what to do
Right.
in this situation. And you don't have to be argumentative about
Right.
it. Just state it firmly.
Yes.
Am I free to go?
Because if not, then you are detained. Whether they're touching you, whether they've grabbed you, you're detained. And that's the hard part sometimes, I think, to get into your head is because, well, I'm walking down the street. I'm gone. You see what I'm saying? I'm walking, but then I can just walk away. But you want to listen to that answer of whether you're not.
And again, in some situations, you can answer that question for yourself without verbally saying those words. Certainly, if the officers have their guns out on you, you are detained and
Right.
you are not free to leave. Do not try to leave when their guns are out.
Right. Right. Now, yes, I mean, and that's where we use our common sense, you know, to see what is going on around you. Anger, emotion. You know, we possess those things and they're good for us in a lot of situations. You know, we know when to bring anger, we know when to bring happiness, emotion, joy, things like that. You know, the thing I like to say is before the police encounter, you gotta go to your Zen moment. you gotta actually tell yourself to chill. Because you want to be angry, because someone is doing something to you. You want it not to occur, but it is occurring. So we call those situations things that you may not control, but control the only thing you can, which is you.
But we as the community can do what we have been doing with these cases and what I believe the young lady did with George Floyd, and that is record. If you see law enforcement has somebody stopped, pull over and start recording.
Stay a distance away.
Yeah, don't interfere, but record. You have these cell phones, our smartphones, you can zoom in and get a close view without getting close, right? Don't interfere with their investigation. We certainly are not advocating that, but record because you may save somebody's life. And I'm thinking of a particular incident that occurred when myself and Mr. Brooks saw a man that we clearly saw probably had mental problems being detained and about to be arrested. And Mr. Brooks began recording. He had his iPad with him and he began recording with his iPad. And there were a few cops on scene, but multiple cops showed up. And one cop ran into that scene and we could tell this cop was about to do damage, but he looked over and saw that we were filming and he didn't kick this man in the head, which is what it looked like he was about to do. So that is one thing that we as a community can continue to do. And you don't have to wait until it goes bad to start recording. If you see the cops have somebody stopped, pull over, stop a safe distance away and start recording that interaction. And do it in a way so that the cop knows that it's being recorded, because sometimes that will stop them from abusing someone.
Even if you have cameras in your car, you know, a lot of people are investing in putting the
GoPro cameras in the car.
And that's a great investment. And if the cop walks up, you just let him know, hey, you're being recorded. Just want you to know.
Now, Sheepdog Protector indicated that some states have made it illegal to record police. It is not illegal here in California. You do need, so in California, record. If you live in another state, check the laws in your state on whether or not you can record law enforcement officers. And we should be working toward, if you live in a state where you cannot record law enforcement officers.
Change that law.
Work towards changing that law. Contact your state senators, contact your state legislators regarding changing that law. Because what is the reason? What is the basis for not being able to record an officer? He's in public.
And I would love to challenge that, because the First Amendment of the Constitution does give you some rights, and you're in public. They are public officers. They should give you their name and badge number, and you are more than likely to record. There just may be restrictions on it. That's all. So check that stuff out. Don't believe it what anybody says. You check it out, because the First Amendment of the Constitution will allow you free speech. And here's the thing: if I'm a photographer and I'm recording in public, how am I doing anything wrong? I own the area that I'm recording.
But again, check the law in your state. And if it doesn't allow you to record, start making efforts, contacting groups to press for that law to be changed. Well, lawman, we had a pretty
long
spirited, long session, an emotional session.
But we have to. We have to. I mean, tell you the truth, we are just scratching a surface. Okay? Because there's some things to take away from this. That process that we're talking about, it's going to happen that way. The thing that we are seeing is a lot of attacks and death. And it's us. It's people who look like us. We're seeing that rogue cop, that person who wants trouble, seems to be there, that we cannot root out. We don't know who it is.
But don't fall for it.
Right.
Don't fall into
their trap. Right.
Don't fall into that trap.
Because they can bait you. And that's why you shut up. You know, it's amazing, because if you were able to shut up through the entire process, I mean, you go through booking, you go through everything, and you're not saying a word, the officers may come to you and award you a prize, because they'll say, we've never seen anyone behave like that. And that's what you want. Meaning this, they will be shocked that you are not confronting, that you are not saying something against them, that you are not questioning why they pulled you over.
But what do you mean by award of prize?
Well, I mean, a fake reward, obviously. I mean, but they'll come by and tell you, they'll just come by and tell you, wow, what a wonderful prisoner you were.
Yeah, but
you
again, that's just an effort to try and start a conversation.
Right. Exactly.
Don't fall
you
for that.
Still shut up. You just smile and look at them. And that's it.
So we're going to end another session with Courtside. We appreciate you being here with us during this time, and hopefully we've educated you, we've informed you. Again, always feel free to give us a call. You can leave a message if you have a question and you're unable to ask it on Fridays when we're live. That number is 916-384-8204. Again, 916-384-8204.
Invite your friends and neighbors to come in and have a little session with us. We have to start this dialogue because the time for action was yesterday, really. And so we have to continue this dialogue, and we have to figure out what we do about things that happen to us out on the street. And this is the place we start.
This is it. Here at Courtside with Lawman and Carmen B. Thank you. Have a good evening.
Ooh.